So the other thing that we need to consider with this, we have this roll line happening down center front. Flat relationship on the front of the chest going up to the neck for that roll line. So you have a little built up neckline. That is why we're getting to cross grain in the center backs, because if we were still on straight grain, we wouldn't be able to get that rise, that band in the back. We gotta consider our closure in the front. So if we have a button closure, normally we would have an extension, okay? So you would take that center front line and you would go 1 inch or 2 inches, however big you were trying to, whatever button size you wanted. But because we are, or most of us, have our breaking point right at center front, there's no extension to be had. So we have some options. You can, while we have this open and unpinned, you can change that breaking point right now. Just move it over, move the pin over a little bit, 1 inch to 2 inches. The more you go over to the side, the harder it is to make this lay pretty and flat. It's doable, so if you want to try it. Otherwise, the way we're going to get around this is by still keeping the break point at center front, and we're going to clip into, let's say the break point's right here, and button is going to be a little bit below it. Right where you want that lapel to disappear, and this should be done after you mark everything in your settle. You're going to clip right to the turning point, and we're going to flip that right over and create a little extension just for the below area of our breaking point. And this is going to do two things. It's going to buy us a little bit of room to house the button right there. It's also going to give us some layers to cover each other, a little bit of modesty for the wearer. So otherwise you would have a closure right here at center front and a split, okay, if you just met each other. With a little bit of overlap, let's say about like this, that's a lot more coverage. So we would have this transition from center front, break point, and then you would just create some sort of line for the rest of your dress. So the more circular you are with this, the harder it is to keep this up without some additional hardware. So more than likely we're gonna still have to put a little snap or some little hook and thread bar right here to keep it closed. But the left side is gonna do exactly the same as the right. So they'll just cross right over each other and give each other a little bit of double layer action. And then we'll still be able to put our button here. So it's up to you whether you want to keep it at center front like this and do this with it, or you can just change the break point over to here, and then you can still do this shape or drop it down. So that's a choice you should make before we get to the rest of this shawl color. If you don't want to make any changes, that's fine, you don't have to. I'm going to keep it as it is because most people are doing it that way, and the sample should show that. Okay, so wherever your break point is, okay, you want to get a good visual on where this roll line's happening. Give it a light tug so you know that it's sitting exactly where that roll line is going to happen when you would stitch it together. Okay, I know that that is fully extended out from my roll line. Now you have this flap coming down from the neck here. This is a straight grain, you can see. It's just extending past my shoulder. And so when you pull it up and put it towards the neckline, so it's standing straight up in the air, you can still see this straight grain. I'm trying to get my cross grain onto my center back neck. So I'm gonna walk this around. And it's gonna give you a little bit of trouble. You'll have some bunching here, and there are things to remedy it. But so now I can see where my HPS is, and there's a little bit of tucking happening with my fabric, and all I wanna do is walk it around so it has a pretty solid relationship, like there's no extra fabric on the collar side of my neckline, because I'm trying to get a seam that's gonna sew to this seam under there. I can't have too many waffling bumps, but we do need a little bit of ease, so it can't be full on stretched tight. Once you get that relationship, that cross grain relationship up and down on center back neck, put a little pin right at that neckline area. Just one right at the bottom, at the neckline, and make him a secret pin. Just stick him all the way through till he goes away. So now you see a bunch of wrinkles happening right here, right? Now get a visual of what this is going to do when it is a shawl collar. So you're folding over your lapel. Remember that the wider this lapel fabric is, the harder it is to go around this corner. So that's why we fold it under while we're getting these visuals, and why we eventually are going to clip into it when we draw our shape on there. And you're bringing this back around to another cross grain relationship at center back. And this is just temporary. I want to see if I'm getting close to what I want, basically. So here's my roll line. Everything is sitting where I need it to. And I think that is a decent start to it, okay? I feel happy with that. So once you get to that point, you have your shawl collar folded over to get a simulation pretty much. And then you're basically trying to peek under this lapel. I want to keep a hand on it so it's not really shifting around, but I want to peek under without pulling it or pushing it. I want to see what fabric is under there that's extra. So I can see there's a good little widget of fabric that's just folding over on itself. It's trying to make a dart by itself. So pinch that fabric out, being careful not to pull any fabric from the side of the lapel or from the side of the body. You're just pinching out what was extra. And if you're holding that entire intake upward, like a little sandwich, like a pinch sandwich, I'm gonna put my pin parallel through it. You have to leave this open, or up, I should say, so you're not pinning this dart down. You're gonna have to mark on both sides of this eventually. And you're feeding this right into the HPS. You want the bottom of your intake of this dart to feed right into HPS.
We shift it around if it's not. Mine's coming in a little bit.
Yeah, you want to make it go to the HPS, because that's basically going to be like a little seam line if you can get right there on the edge. So to get the rest of your, find the rest of your dart, you need to stay within this roll line so it doesn't come into the view, right? And it also doesn't show on the other side of your lapel width. So you're basically feeding it into the HPS and then hiding it somewhere under this full width. So we don't see him at all. And if you have a particularly long dart or a wide intake, it's probably gonna take you down close to the bust line, but you can end it prematurely. You don't have to have it perfect, like end at a perfect point. You do wanna end it before you get to the bust, like a few inches before. And if it's not in the right position, just scoot it over a little bit. Keep on double checking that you're out of sight with the dart. Okay, and so now you probably will notice that your collar is standing away from the neck a little more easily, which is a good thing with that dart in there. Then once you have that dart in, you can find the real shape that you want to stick with for your shawl collar. And at this point, I'm going to unfold my collar and clip into him so I can find the actual shape. But you'll see now, once you unfold that style line of your shawl collar, it's way hard to wrap it around now and get it to be on cross grain at the center back. And it's all because of that width that you're trying to manipulate. That's why folding it under helps, and that's why clipping it is going to help as well. So the big one is right at the shoulder seam. I can see my fold line on my shawl collar, so I know not to clip past that. If you don't see your fold line that well, you can pencil it in while it's folded if you want. But my fold is pretty good in there, so I can see where not to clip past. So if I go in right at the shoulder seam, that's going to release a lot of tension, and it's allowing me to curve around the neck now. I'm gonna keep on doing that until I get this upper part of my shawl collar on cross grain. That fold line you see, that's wherever you had your lapel folded and you thought that was about how you wanted it. If you don't see that fold line, you gotta draw something in. And instead of a pencil, it's sometimes easier to use a marker for something like that because you're trying to trace right on a folded edge, and pressing down on it, like bearing down, doesn't really work. Once you get below the bust, it doesn't really need too much clipping just because it's a straight shot. And while I'm back here, I'm gonna check to see if my initial neckline, where the first part of my shawl collar meets my bodice, if that back neckline needs clipping, any additional clipping, because a lot of tension happens right there as well. You can take those clips right up close to the neckline seam and you're fine. Everybody is going to have the same spot where their collar or their lapel is ending. So at the center back, you're going to want it to end just slightly below the neckline seam, right? So you can hide that construction. And you're gonna want to draw your marks and pin right there, slightly below. But then when you come around to the shoulder seam, it needs to just graze the shoulder or the garment. So it's the same idea as our convertible collar, because everybody's gonna have a different rise. We didn't preset a rise on this collar, like an inch and a half or anything, but it will be all the same in that we hit the same spots when the rolled collar comes back down onto the garment. Okay, so you're going to be deciding the style of your sleeve now. So you can stay with this, you can go with a seam right down the normal shoulder seam area. You can change from a seam, like a raglan seam from your HPS, do something weird like that. I was thinking from that line and then making like a swoop into cross grain on here. So you'd still have a seam, still capable of putting some volume elements in there. But while you have it like this and not marked yet, give a few minutes to playing around with it. Just fiddle with it and see if you come up with something fabulous. If you don't care that much, just do a straight seam. I don't care either. So the other thing you need to look at with this is the fit of a potential fit of your shoulder muscle, or whatever wears shoulder muscle in here. So if you put your hand in here and make the biggest fist you can, and it's too tight right here, a lot of people have this too tight, especially in the first section, and there needs to be an adjustment if it's too tight. This is fine right here. There's enough volume right here to house a big shoulder muscle. But if it's not, you need to take some volume from the bottom area and put it up top. And you can do that by shifting this line, this bust line, get it closer to even, okay, with your bust line on your form. And if your darts are really, or your pleats, your inverted pleats, if you have too much intake right here, you need to take away some of that and push that up here then. Because that's taking all of your volume into that. You need to give some of it back, put it up there. And then it's gonna require you to reposition your side seam and your waist and the whole shape, and the relationship of your front sleeve section to your back sleeve section. Still needs to be checked on grain to make sure they're with each other, but it still happens whether you, whatever space you have or have to change the front to. I want to go over marking this really quickly. So when you have your shawl collar all done, let's say, you're happy with it and you're ready to mark things. Obviously, you're going to mark right on center back. You don't want to be too small with this. If anything, you want to be bigger, like across the center back. Give it an extra 1/8 of an inch, if anything. If you're too small, that's going to give you problems. So generously marking center back for this. Mark about an 1/8 of an inch below your neckline for your back. You do not want to see your seam, your neckline seam. So you want to make sure you're covering that. And then you're going to come around to the shoulder seam. And this should just be in a spot where it's not creating any conflicts between the shawl collar hitting the shoulder and creating dragging in the fabric. So a nice balanced area where it just hits the shoulder. And then this is your style line where you can do whatever you want with. Normally, with this project, I want you to just keep it simple and do a curved line, but you could do whatever shape you wanted, scalloped or something really abstract. But we do have to understitch this seam Because where we had it folded originally, when we were testing out what it looked like, that's not gonna be a fold line, it's gonna be a seam line right there. Where we gotta connect it with the facing and then understitch it. So making something crazy right now is not the best. But, so your lapel, your shawl lapel can be anything you want at the bottom. It can go into nothing right at the break point at center front. It can vanish into nothing. Or sometimes you'll see shawl collars that have like a rounded end or even just a squared off end, and then it goes into its bottom area. So this is where you're going to sort of eyeball and make a shape that you think looks right for this garment. So I'm gonna stay sort of in the middle ground of not too skinny and not too wide, and I'm going to make it vanish right at center front. No curving, no squared off edges. But again, you can do whatever you like. You want to make a really clear dash mark where your break point is, okay? Maybe even make a little note to yourself so you don't think it's just a normal notch. Maybe just like a BP. And then also slash into your extension past center front. Originally we had that 6-inch extension, but we took it down. We took a couple inches off, we tore it off, so you should have a little bit. And clip right to your break point, so you're right horizontal from it. You're going in right at the cross grain, right to your break point, so you can flip that side back around. Then you'll be able to find your shape that you want right at your high hip for the skirt part. When you get everything marked for the collar, the lapel, you're gonna need to mark underneath it. So you can then take this layer up, let it sit against the neckline. It's gonna stand up on its own pretty much. All you need are dash marks at the back neckline. Make sure you're getting right on top of your previous markings, because otherwise it's not gonna match up. If you have a little bit of extra room on the collar side where your neckline is, that is good, because you need a little bit of ease in that part so you can fit it in that. Not too much though, you don't want a huge amount like an extra 1/4 inch. Should just be a little bit of extra hanging out there. Give yourself a cross mark for the the dart leg on one side. That's essentially your HPS. And you also have a cross mark on the other side of your dart. And this very well could be a curved dart. It's up to you whether you want to stay with the curve or just make it a straight shot from your dart legs to your vanishing point. Either way, you need that information. I'm going to use the whatever my dart pins are telling me, and that's gonna give me a stylized dart that is not a straight shot. So I'll have to do some really careful construction when I put this together. When you lift your shawl collar up to get those neckline marks and the dart markings, at center back, make sure you have both directions. You should have where center back is vertically, and then also where the neckline lands. So it's pretty much a cross mark right at center back. So you see how there's like a little bit of bagginess right here in the upper area? Don't let that scare you off. That is a good thing to have. You don't want to try to get rid of that. That's what we need in the upper arm area. When you're making your underarm seam, don't forget to put at least 2 notches, one at natural waist and one in the curve, but better if you put at least like 1 to 2 notches right on the curve of your underarm seam. So the box pleats, when you're marking them, use a color and go right in the center. Right on the waist tape, I'm making a vertical dash that is right where the 2 pleats meet each other. And then, with a different color, or like regular pencil or whatever you want, I'm gonna unpin each of my pleats, and I'm going to put a mark on either side of them. This is giving me marks to tell them where the fabric comes together and then where these 2 should meet. So I'm not drawing anything on the fold line of these pleats. And then when I am truing it and putting it onto pattern paper, I will even them out. I will total the intake from both of them and distribute that into 2. You go do the same for the back, obviously. The length is done on pattern paper. Ideally, you would have this sample and then put it into pattern paper, put it back into muslin, sew it up again, and fix those problems, then fix it on the pattern paper. We don't have a lot of time, so we're not doing that step, which we would really need to do because there are so many elements that are new on here. But then you guys know the rest of it. You can give yourself any type of hem if you want it to go straight down. Did we already talk about hems? So little, you know, you could do as tight or as flowy as you want. You could even do a little wobble skirt with a vent in the back if you thought that was cute, or a hobble skirt. A wobble skirt. You can do A-line as long as the natural waist fits right there. Then you're good. You can do whatever you want.
So you could just could we just fit to the hip and have it be like a longer top?
Fit to the.
Like cut it off at the hip line and have it be a longer
Oh,
top
longer
instead
top.
of a
Look at
dress
it.
or skirt.
Yeah, yeah. If you want to have a shorty and have be like you would wear leggings with it or something, is that
Yeah.
Or could it look like a jacket?
Yeah.
One of those like jacket dress looking things.
Yes, you can absolutely keep it short like this, whatever length you want, as long as you are at least to the waist and maybe the hip line. If you did want to go with a really long sleeve and have it, let's say there's all this volume up here at top and you wanted it to come down to a fitted wrist area, you would just need to lengthen it this way, all the way this way, and you can then shape it exactly to like a 7-inch. You know, you need about 5 inches to get your hand through. Otherwise you need a button closure or some sort of cuff placket. But give yourself a little bit of time, because even if it's like 5 minutes and you test out some different sleeve things, you might come up with something really fabulous and cool, and then we'll all have to use that on our next dress. Just kidding. So, any questions that you guys can think of before we turn this video off? So, if they're wondering anything, questions?
Just so for class on Wednesday, do we have to have the whole thing patterned and true and stuff?
Yeah, I'm thinking that, that would be really good if we had the front and the back patterned, and then in class we can pattern the facing together. And then, we'll start cutting out our fashion fabric. That'll put us in an okay spot to try to get some of it done by Saturday. But then, we sort of need to move in to our other projects. We can't spend too much time. But yeah, I'll send out an email and
So
as
the final, like, finish version will be doing Monday, next Monday?
Monday or Wednesday. I mean, we might need to do some more in-class work type of stuff.
Sounds good.
What about the marking of any of this? You guys know the rest of the marking is cross mark, cross mark, cross mark. And then the regular, if you end up keeping these pleats, that raw edge of your pleats right here, that's your seam line, essentially. So, and so I already cut my chunk away inside. Like I found the seam that it would need to have this seam and then that seam connect. So I was like, I just trimmed all that excess in there. So I can't come up here with my back panel to meet this.
Okay.
And I think some other people also did that. But if you want to, you can, and you want to get that shoulder seam, that just simple shoulder seam right down. All you have to do, and you already cut your piece off, take it, baste another section on the same grain, just really quick running stitch, and you can go for it. But that'll also give you the opportunity to do other types of seams too, if you want to like roll the seam back towards, you know,